Once you've been through the first lab itself, you've seen the IR spectra for starting material 1 to intermediate C and product in particular. And so this should all be a review. I'll remind you that what we're really doing is riffing on the IR spectral interpretation poster with its useful OH and NH region and CO double bond stretch regions, carbonyl region. So these two regions are really what we're going to focus on in the context of the first lab. So in lab itself, you walked through this analysis, and what you were hopefully looking at is starting material 1 and noting that there are two different carbonyls in the carbonyl region for starting material 1, which makes sense because you have two different carbonyls. You should also have noted that there is nothing in the OH and NH region because there are no OHs or NHs on the molecule. They would be drawn out if they were there to be seen. Meanwhile, of course, when we were looking at starting material 2, you saw these incredibly small but real peaks in the NH2 region. This is the fangs from the spectral interpretation poster. You would also have noticed, of course, that there are no carbonyls present in the structure or present in the spectrum itself. So the combination of these two tiny peaks in the NH2 region and the lack of carbonyls really describes starting material 2. Intermediates A and B, of course, are a horrible mixture of at least two different compounds, and so this IR is quite a mess. What you see is a presence of many peaks in the carbonyl region, 4 different peaks in the carbonyl region, and a whole bunch of stuff, an envelope, so there's a carboxylic acid, and then possibly a fang due to the NHs. Anyhow, there's a lot going on in this IR, and the moral of the story is we have at least two different compounds. It's a mess. When we move on to intermediate C, there are these two extremely small peaks in the NH region, but there's really nothing to speak of in the molecule itself that suggests that you would have peaks down there. So it's entirely possible that those are not necessarily real, or possibly they're real in some impurity that's present. Intermediate C doesn't contain any OHs or NHs in the molecule and doesn't have any big peaks in this region. The intermediate C does contain two different carbonyls and therefore should have two different peaks in the carbonyl region, and does. Finally, we come to the product itself, which has an NH type amine proton and thereby has a single fang, a knockout fang from the IR interpretation poster. The product contains two different carbonyls and therefore has two different peaks in the carbonyl region. So as a whole, you expect the product to have an NH, and it does, and two carbonyls, and it does. This collection of functional groups is the main thing that I'd like you to take away from the IR interpretation exercise that we did in Lab 1. Not necessarily focusing on the fingerprint region, because for these compounds, they are exceedingly messy. If I flip through them quickly, you see an enormous number of peaks over on the right-hand side. So we are not going to focus on the right-hand side. We focus on the left-hand side, the functional group region, in particular, the region where there are OHs, NHs, and or carbonyls.